Good day. As you know, I am Kaylin. In today's training session, we're going to be discussing server settings. So I'm going to explain to you, some of the settings that are there, and go through each tab there. So if you move on over to our configuration module, we go to our server settings, and let's start right at the top. You've got your speed, so you've got your processor, which is your heading. Then your subcategory you've got is speed. Now you can set the processing speed of the system during the daytime. Perhaps you've got a very busy PC, and you don't want it to run at max, or you wanted to quickly process those hours. In that case, then you would set it to max. You can set that here, and you can also specify then when nighttime. So obviously, when nighttime comes, it will then go back to the default setting, and it obviously won't run, at that high speed. Let's say you set it to max for argument's sake. It'll obviously then not run at that high speed then to process all that. If you move on over to quiet time, this is generally used when your IC guys does backups of the server. You can set a quiet time in order for the system to basically go into standby mode, if I can call it that, where it doesn't actually collect any clockings or process any hours, and that obviously allows a backup to get done, of the data, the CS time data. Okay, and then obviously once that period is done, it'll come out and it'll start collecting those clockings and processing hours, etc. You've got your auto delete tab. This is basically where you set how long the data should be kept in your system. If you set this to 9999, that's pretty much going to keep it forever, and it'll never ever delete those records then. You can also go and set that. Let's just say it's you want to only keep the last 3 years data or 2 years or whatever that may be. You can then go and set this down then, and you can set it individually, which information, how long you want to keep that. And then also you need to specify between which times this auto deletes can take place. So if you have just set it, for the last year or whatever, you can set that anything between let's say 6 in the morning and in this case 6 at night, it won't do any auto deletions there. Okay, and if you then go to your advanced tab, currently we're not really making use of this too much, so we're going to skip that then. You've got your security tab, which you can then specify if you want the audit log on. This will basically track any things that have happened, like in this case you can go and specify as well that if you go and change a clocking, you have to put in a reason for that, and then obviously that'll get logged. Otherwise, if you're not forcing them to put a reason in, it'll obviously just log that a clocking has been added and by which user, etc., etc. there. Okay, so that's just then for security purposes. If you move to the next section, which is our communications, and we move on over to ports, you'll see then you've got your default communication port. Now that obviously depends on the setup of your clock, because generally the clocks are set up on the network, so they will obviously have a IP address and all that. You've also then got your maximum pole delay, which is basically you can set then the maximum amount of minutes between when it must collect those clockings. So this is generally used for your online clocks. You would also then with that set your online your poll time and all that. So basically then every 5 minutes it will then collect those clockings in and check for that. You've also got your online sync time. So that is how often a synchronization needs to happen. Now this only applies to your CS time clocks, where it will actually sync the information between CS time and then the CS time clocks. You've also got a sync period, so you can set when these synchronizations are allowed to happen. And then you've got the ESM IP address. Now this is basically an employee status monitor, and this allows you to monitor the replication that happens between the CS time clocks, and whether there's a connection that's perhaps been lost for a certain amount of minutes. If you are running then ESM application, you can then put that IP address in there. You've got your modem section. We obviously don't use modems anymore. That's old school. You've got your clock time as well. Yeah, you can go and set your daylight savings time, if this applies to your country, and whether it needs to move forwards or backwards. to set those then. You've also got your access control. This is where you can obviously go and set the rules regarding your visitors cards and your temporary cards that you would add to the system. And if there is a specific access right that needs to apply on that last day. And then if we move on to the advanced tab, here you've got things that pertain to certain clocks as well. The old Cape clocks, you've got certain things that you can enable there. You've also got your offline clocks that you can go and set the poll time. So that's basically the collection time. So how often in minutes should this then collect those clockings. And then obviously you've got the other eco clocks then as well. And then if we move on over to the export section, if you do make use of the export facility for Pay Global or Procedure, you can go and specify that and just specify the file name that needs to be saved. And then we've got our internet section. So we've got the email so that you can go and configure your system in order to email your reports or any information out of CS Time. So that you would just fill in your SMTP server settings and obviously your username and password. And if you would like any alerts when employees are created or terminated or that, you can go and specify that as well then. Your FTP section, you can set up a FTP server and go and specify all those details there. And then you can specify your support details. So in this case, this would, from a dealer's point of view, this would then be your contact details where the client can get hold of you. You've also got your web server, so that would obviously be in order for you to use the web interface for CS Time, you would need to go and configure the IP address of that server and which port it needs to use for all those details and whether it times out or not. Okay, so this would all pertain to that web server that you can go and set those things. You've then also got the attendance section. So this is if you're using the attendance manager or the real-time attendance server, you can go and specify if it needs to filter it on a specific classification, and then obviously which port that attendance manager would use then. And then we've got our last section here, which is the field name. So if you need any extra custom fields in your CS Time, you can go and specify this here. And then once you've actually, like in this case, I've got 2 custom fields. Once you actually go and change on an employee, you will see those details underneath the employee there. And that's your sum total of your server settings. So there's, depending on what you actually want to configure, there are a few settings that you would need to set for that. It's not too difficult, I think. And hopefully you've learned a few things in this video and that you will join me next time. Goodbye.